Welcome to the Spring Hills Podcast. My name is Garett Elliott, and I'm joined by Pastor Bret and Kaitlin Elliott. We're going to talk about week 3 of our series, Let's Be Honest. Now, Pastor Bret wrapped up that series this weekend, so he's going to kick off a new one on Saturday night called The Church is Essential. Go to springhills.org or download the free Spring Hills app to find out when and where you can watch those services live or on demand from the comfort of your own home. So let's go ahead and head on over to the green room with Pastor Bret and Kaitlin Elliott to talk about week 3 of our series, Let's Be Honest.
Hey, welcome everybody. We are all done with our series, Let's Be Honest. So tonight, we've got Pastor Bret in here to chat about it a little bit. We're going to talk about the series. We'll get him to do a little teaser for the next series and where he's going to go with his teaching in the next few weeks. And then also Kaitlin Elliott is with us as well. We're going to talk through week 3 of Let's Be Honest. And, Bret, I really did enjoy this. I always enjoy your sermons. You do a really good job. We give you lots of compliments here. I'm sure you appreciate it. But yeah, Psalm 118:5, you talked about being distressed and how David was writing this psalm. He was distressed. I wanted to jump in right away to the elevator experience, because the elevator experience you mentioned, being in an elevator, you might look up and see what floor you're on, but it's pretty just uncomfortable.
Well, we don't like narrow places,
right.
And the idea of David being in distress, you could say the Hebrew word, it has the idea of being in a narrow place without a lot of options. And so the elevator is a great illustration, because I hate being in a crowded elevator. Nobody likes it.
I hate it too.
You just want to get out.
Tight spots.
And then the picture of having the doors open and a broad, large lobby.
It made me think of the fresh air that you feel, when you're in a tight space for a while. In the elevator, you're not in there for very long typically. But Garett Ward and I the other day, we were in some costumes for the Adventure Week stuff, and we're outside. It's hot, and in the costume, there's no fresh air. And so we're in those costumes for about 40 minutes. And when you're talking about this elevator experience, I remember when I finally got to unzip the mask and the fresh air just came rushing in. I'm like, oh, this feels so good. And then that's what I started thinking about when you talked about the elevator experience. But
so if you think about it, for our listeners, what is it that is making you feel like you have no options?
Right.
And that's the idea of distress or narrowness. If you feel like you're really tight financially and you don't have a lot of room and there's emotion attached to that, that's distress. If you are not sure what your future is going to be, for your job or for your life or whatever, and you don't have a lot of options, it's like no way out, that creates distress. And when you're in distress, you can be desperate. You're like, what am I going to do? And God is the one who moves you into an open space, which is another metaphor for God brings you into a place of peace, of rest, fresh air, if you will, and he opens your life up. I think it's a beautiful picture when David says from distress to an open place, and God's the one who did it.
Yeah.
And I think too that the narrowness of that situation, it is producing something, that it's intentional, that God is allowing that tension and that pain to happen so that he can open that door to that broad place, and then you come to know him more, or
That is so true. How many times do we want to get out of distress, but not the way God is going to take us through it? We just want to escape.
We panic.
We panic. Some people are in danger of just escaping, right, through drinking too much or, spending too much time just watching movies or whatever, just tuning out. Mm-hmm. And God's wanting us to really seek him, not some alternative thing that's not even healthy for us, to bring us out of our own stress. But he's teaching us.
Right. I feel like that being backed into a corner is kind of that feeling where you're out of options and just running out of options, and then just panicking and making a decision that ultimately isn't going to be doing you any good to get you out of the situation.
Yeah. And David's in a cave, that's what it says about the Psalm in the beginning of the Psalm, is that David is in a cave. Now, whether he's writing it from the cave, some commentators suggest that he's actually writing this in the cave. And I'm like, I don't know about that, but it may be after he got out, but the description is being hunted down by Saul, being locked in a cave, a dark place, running for your life. And it's literally running for your life because Saul's trying to kill him. And David had run from Saul for up to 9 years. I mean, somebody trying to kill you
Can you
for
imagine
8
that?
years. I can't imagine.
Going all over the place, trying to hide from him, and even having the opportunity that you said earlier in the series to kill Saul, and not taking that opportunity.
Well, and he had an opportunity here too.
Yeah.
And he didn't take it. And that's to your point, Kaitlin, is like God was teaching David, because here's Saul that comes into the cave to uncover his feet, or to cover his feet, excuse me, the Hebrew, cover his feet, which I think he's taking a nap.
Right.
All right? Other commentators suggest he's going to the restroom or something. But I think he goes in because
how does covering his feet translate to that? What's why is that even a theory?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Maybe bending down.
If
is
you cover
covering,
your
or
feet, you know,
With your trousers.
you're letting your trousers down, I guess. But I think they went into those caves it was cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool in the cave. So here I am, they're exhausted, take a rest. And David could have killed Saul, but he didn't. He chose to trust God and sort of pass the test that you're talking about.
Yeah. And something too, I really appreciate about the fullness of David's story for us in the scriptures is that there's 2 times where David is running from caves to caves. And it's one time when he's young and he's learning and he's about to rule as king over Israel. And then there's another time when he's running from his son Absalom. And there is for us a contrast in the scriptures about the stillness and the peace that he had from all those previous years. He had learned some things about those other years and the Psalms that come from that. And so just as someone who's younger, who has gone through some of those caves jumping experiences in my own personal life, is there anything that from someone who's, in their, 50s, that
Oh, that's a nice compliment. Yes.
that,
She's being so careful.
Right. Is there anything that we can sidestep so we don't have to? I mean, what's the first thing that you should be doing when you are in a tight, narrow space?
That's a great question. I think reading the Psalms is really helpful. I think reading the life of David, I think reading the life of Moses, any truth you can get into your head about cave experiences is really helpful. Just that they do happen. They happen to David. They've happened throughout the years to great Christians. It'll happen to you. It's not a shock. It's not a surprise. Sometimes maybe as a young Christian, we go through things and we go, this shouldn't be happening because I'm a Christian and my pastor said that I would have an abundant life. And so why am I depressed? Why do I feel?
Why am I not doing this the right way?
Yeah. And that's
what am I doing wrong?
What am I doing wrong? And rather than, I think you get, and I'm in my 60s, but you get experience in life and you're just not surprised by another experience like that. It's part of it. It's just part of our lives. The hope is that God will use it. Our current COVID-19 thing is driving me crazy, but it's like, have I learned anything about God's ability to take us through things? Sometimes I'm like, no, I haven't. I've forgotten everything. But he will again take us through this and show us his faithfulness and his glory.
Yeah, time and time again, we see God work great things out of things that the enemy is trying to use for evil. And I don't know why I do that now. I'm not in my 60s, but I still, I'm 33 now. So like I've had, and we've even in the last few years as a community been through, the fires that actually hit Santa Rosa, the ones that it caused us to evacuate last year. And now this is affecting everybody. But just like time and time again, where I let it take me down, and like I feel in this tight space, and it's not the first thing I do is not out of my distress. I don't call on the Lord. And I wish I would, because I've seen him time and time again bring us out of it and do amazing things out of, the stressful situations.
To bring a point to something that Bret had said in a previous sermon about God's disciplining, and you mentioned a time in high school where you were doing a million different things, and it just really spoke to me because you went to your pastor and you're just like, I'm having a hard time, and he did not give you the right answer that you needed during that time. And someone else came alongside you and said, God's disciplining you. And, kind of gave, you need boundaries, you need to limit yourself and this, and just what to do after you're in those cave type moments where you feel shocked, or narrow type spaces. It reminded me of Hebrews 12:12, where it says, therefore strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees, because it has a tendency to leave us weak. And it's like, did I do something wrong? And it's after that disciplining retraining, training time, and just even that word, having it mean something different, like than what discipline has meant.
Yeah,
for
I
people.
think God has to give you wisdom for the experience that you're in right now. So people listening, we don't know what they're going through. Some may be depressed. Some may have a lot of anxiety. Some may be experiencing a lot of fear. Some may feel really defeated by the choices they're making. Some may be just exhausted, overwhelmed. So it takes a little wisdom to know why you may be in the situation that you're in. It really does. In some cases, it is, as you mentioned, God's discipline, which is, and he's working in ways that we usually see in hindsight. It's hard to figure it all out in the middle of it. But if if you're in a posture of discipline by God, it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. We think of discipline as a bad thing all the time. It's corrective. It's not punitive. He's not punishing you. He loves you. It's like the picture of the vineyard. The vineyard owner prunes the fruit. Well, if you're the vine and you get one of your branches lopped off, it's like, and you don't want that to happen, but the good vineyard owner knows where to cut, and then there's more fruit, and God does the same thing in our life. He's far more gentle, in my experience, than he is severe, But, the anxiety, I had an experience in high school where I went through a lot of anxiety. It can still kind of perk up, not a lot, but it was acute anxiety in high school, and my pastor told me, man, and I was doubting God's goodness. That was the big spiritual issue. I was like, how can God be good? And I'm going through this horrible experience. And his advice was, well, you better get your life together because Jesus might come tonight. And you're not ready.
Oh my goodness.
You're not ready to meet him, and all that, which did nothing for me, increased my anxiety. Yeah. But a girl from the youth group read Hebrews 12:10. I don't know if you have your Bible open to Hebrews 12:10.
The discipline, yeah.
Yeah, read 12:10.
They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good in order that we may share in his holiness.
There it is. God disciplined us for our good. That's what really hit me, that we might share in his holiness. It was like, okay, God's allowing me to go through this for good. And then, of course, I've seen it in the boundary, learning to establish some boundaries. And if I sense that the little anxiety is coming on, I generally know why and how to deal with it, and a host of other things. But to your point, sometimes your cave might be the loving hand of God in your life.
Yeah. You mentioned a story about a guy you talked to after the Tubbs fire, and you had talked about. I think I'm trying to make sure I got this in the right order here, but you said sometimes people outside the faith will say, "Poor Christian, you're such a small, simple life, simple, boring life." It reminded me a few years ago. Kiki actually was teaching, and she talked about her weight loss program and how during the holidays she'd have people eating the dessert and be like, "Oh, Kiki, I'm so sorry that you can't have this." And she used this as the analogy of like, "You don't need to be sorry for me. I'm free from that bondage now of feeling like I need to have that." She talked to her perspective was the opposite of, "Oh, yeah, you don't need to be sorry for me. When you're all feeling sorry for me, I'm free from that now. I don't feel like I have to enjoy or I don't have to eat that to enjoy what we're having here and what we're doing." But yeah, it just reminded me of changing the perspective and having the right perspective on what God's doing in your life and the discipline that she has here that she's talking about in that story. It's the same discipline that like I've noticed in my athletics throughout the time. Like if you're being disciplined by a coach, it's like you're disciplined in a way that's going to make you stronger and a better player
and they love
and a
you.
better teammate, they care about you, and they're
Right.
doing it in a way that's going to help improve you. And so yeah, God disciplining, it's going to sharpen you. It's going to ready you for another. I honestly pray that we don't have to do this again, the shelter in place. But, after Tubbs fire, we didn't think we'd have to evacuate again, and we evacuated again. But things like that. God's always in control. But, yeah, the discipline of that God's giving us to sharpen us, to get us ready for the next thing.
Yeah, well, what I was talking about, the small life versus the big life, and sometimes non-Christians say of Christians, you have a small life. You have a very confined life.
I'm sorry, you don't get to enjoy this.
You don't get to enjoy things. You have a sort of a moral code that you follow, and you have to believe certain
Your
things.
list of rules.
So the non-Christian thinks of himself as being free in a broad place. I can go where I want to go. I can believe what I want to believe. I can, have fun. And you poor Christians, it's so boring, small.
What a deception, man. That's, the enemy deceiving people in that way to make it,
Unattractive.
it's crazy. It's so, yeah.
But you just think about it. Okay, the Christian has a big life.
Yeah.
It's just the opposite. You have a relationship with the eternal
You
God.
have a purpose.
You have a purpose for your life.
Given
Your
to
life
you,
will
given
go
to you by the
beyond
Creator.
this.
When you face
You know.
death, it opens up into eternity.
Mm-hmm.
You're part of the grand plan of God. The person that doesn't know Christ, their life is small because all they have is this life, their own desires, and at death they're scared. Their bodies are losing vigor, and it ends up in a sad, hopeless state. And that was the illustration of the guy that lost everything and then said to me,
Yeah, he had all the trophies and
he had
that was
trophies
his
and
identity.
accolades. It was his. That's all he had. That's all he had. And so when he lost it, he said, "I don't know who I am anymore."
Yeah.
Well, that's not all the Christian has. We have the presence of the Holy Spirit being used by God,
We were raised to life.
raised to life, a future, a purpose. So that idea that believers have a small life and that unbelievers have a big life, it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
I think it's a big testament too of God's brilliance and power and just ability to even in the way our world is, that he can have people that are following him have so much joy in the midst of so much struggle and circumstances. That's a testament of this is the fullness of who this person is that we're following, the God of the universe. Look at what he can do in prison cells through Paul.
Yes.
That's who God
Or in a
is.
lion's den through Daniel.
Right.
Yeah, and Paul or
furnace.
David in a
cave.
and in saying, "God be exalted throughout the earth." That's, to me, that's a great example of a big life. God, I trust you in this crazy situation here to work and to do things beyond what I can even imagine. The small life would be a life dependent on happenings, circumstances. If things go well, I'm happy. If they don't, I'm angry,
Yeah.
frustrated.
You're in complete control, and you're not in
Yes.
control. Your appetites
Even though
or
the
your
deception
pride
is that you are in control.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're totally bound by the limitations that life brings them.
Yeah.
I wrote down 3 things just because I feel like I have to think and organize. Okay, what are 3 things about following God? It unfolds who we're meant to be, unfetters us from our chains, the sins hold us, and then it actually unveils the beauty and love of who God really is. Unfolds, unfetters, and unveils.
Ooh, I can use that for
Yeah,
my sermon.
go ahead.
I like
I'll
that.
give you my
That's
notes,
good.
But it's just this is what the life of God actually is freeing you. Unfolds, unfetters, and unveils.
That's a broad place.
Yeah.
All of that stuff
Right.
is a broad place. To become all that you've been made to be in the beauty of that, to behold the one who created the universe, to know him, man, that's not boring.
Not at all. No. I always do this. I hate that I do this, but it's what, sports analogies, but talking about that to being created with a purpose. Because when you're on a team and the coach draws up a play for you, or just draws up a play, and the guys that are on, let's say on the court, if you're playing basketball, they all have their role, they all have their place, and when they're drawing up the play, you see what your role is in that, and you feel that purpose, and you feel that importance, and just being making it a sports analogy for me is always so impactful, because I'm like, man, that is a good feeling when the coach draws the play up and he's like, hey, Garrett, you're right here.
This is what you
This
wanna
is what
do.
you're doing. Here's your purpose. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm on it, man.
Yeah.
You got me ready for this moment, and this is what I'm going to do, even if it's just setting a pick for
And
somebody.
I don't want to let you down.
Not going to let you down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To back that up, I was writing some notes about our trusting in God's authority and power versus man's, and Ephesians 2:10, that God has prepared in advance good works for us to do, and it's that purposeful intentionality with his children that as soon as we come to him, he's already got it lined up in advance. People we're going to talk to, the lives we're going to influence, who we're going to become, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah, and that's great. That verse is so good because in Ephesians 2:10, because it follows Ephesians 2:8 and 9. For by grace we've been saved through faith, not of ourselves. It's the gift of God, that no one should boast. So the good works that we move into are the results of being saved by grace. I think when people view Christians as having a small life, they think they're trying to earn their salvation. They're trying to be good people with a limited, array of options so that they don't blow it and all that. But it's the opposite. You're saved by grace. The gospel is the gift of God for salvation. And then, hey, having been freed from sin and condemnation, God's got some exciting things for you to do.
Yeah.
Co-laborers with him, which is an amazing idea also.
Yeah. Well, hey, we are running out of time here, but Pastor, I wanted to have you maybe give us a little teaser of where we're going in this next series.
Yeah, so we're going to start this coming weekend doing a series on the church is essential. And I have to admit that, some of my frustration at our local officials and governor recognizing that, the church is like the last thing to open up before nail salons, I guess.
Right.
And I shouldn't expect the world to acknowledge that the church is essential. The world is not going to acknowledge that. They don't get it. They really don't. It's, it gets back to our stereotype that the Christian life is a narrow, small life.
Yeah.
So I'm more encouraging our people with this, that this is what the church is about. This is what the church does. This is why we need to be together. So when I originally came up with the idea, I think I was mad at the governor or something, or mad at the classification of the church. But then the more I think about it, I don't expect them to see the church as essential. It's not essential in their life, right?
Right.
So, but for us as believers, I think it'll be a celebrative, encouraging time of how important our meeting together and why we meet together. I want them to grasp the why. Why go to church at all? Why not just stay home and pick and choose online pastors that you like? You know? So I want to get at that, and I think it'll be really encouraging for everybody.
I can't wait for, the first time that we get to be back together where there's no restrictions or anything, and we can be in our auditorium here.
Yes.
And we were singing a song this last Sunday. We're recording for the next weekend, and I came in here an hour before the band did and just turned the music on, and I was just in there by myself, no one else on campus. And I got really sad for a minute, just kind of like, this is just it's 2 months now of these chairs, looking at all these empty chairs. And I'm sure you feel it too when you're preaching to the cameras. And it just had me for a minute. I'm just like, man, why am I putting this into a walls though? Like, why am I putting God in these walls? Like, God's so much bigger than this. And it got me, it's so exciting. I love to sing and play music, and I'm very grateful that I get to do that. But it just gave me a whole nother like excitement to be singing with this purpose of like a God that can't be confined by these four walls and these empty chairs. He's not stopping here because we can't meet. At the same time, I miss our people, man. I miss having people here. I miss the community. That's very genuinely like it makes me very sad, but I'm also, we have hope in Christ, and we have hope that
hopefully we're going to be hearing some good news here.
Yeah.
It's starting to open up.
Yeah.
Fast is not fast enough for me. We want to be safe.
Right.
Of course we want to be safe. But things are starting to open up, and so we're praying for wisdom on when. And
how to do it.
I hope it's going to be sooner than later.
Right. Well, hey, thank you, Pastor Bret, for being here, and Kaitlin for coming down. I appreciate it. And for all of you Spring Hills team members, don't forget tomorrow night is actually, by the time you hear this, it'll be tonight. So Wednesday this week, we have the Team Party drive-through. So come on by, say hi. We are excited to see you all, just like we were saying. We miss you so much. We want to see you. Come get an ice cream. I think they're handing out some
from
ice cream
6 to
sandwiches.
8?
6 to 8, I believe it is. Check out Garett Ward will be sending out an email again, I'm sure, to remind you. So, all right, y'all. We will talk to you next week.